In Wisdom Workshops. My name's Craig. Today we're looking at table saws. Now I got to thinking when I started to look at this video, and I did one about a year ago, but I wanted to do a more detailed one with better camera angles. Now we got better equipment and stuff. And I got to thinking that, maybe table saws aren't quite as popular as they ever used to be. We have, so many track saws available now. So I think a lot of people are cutting their sheet material in particular with that sort of stuff. They're going with a track saw, which they can kind of tuck away and squirrel away in the corner of the workshop, and then doing a lot of their cutting on the bandsaw, of course. I'm a fan of bandsaws. The people who watch these videos, I am a fan of bandsaws. But I think a table saw still has a place in a reasonably sized woodworking workshop. I've got two in here. I've got the craft one, which has, become to be a little bit of a favorite of mine. And I've got my kind of real favorite, the one that stays in my workshop all the time, which is the larger trade kind of dado saw, if you like. I will be doing the majority of setup on the craft one, although we can have a look at the dado saw as well if you want. On the dado saw, towards the end of October, I will be doing a complete overview of that machine. All the little features on it, because it's more than just a table saw. So maybe if you're in the market for treating yourself on a fairly sizable table saw, stay tuned for that one. Check it out towards the end of October. So what am I going to do? We're going to look at table saws. Now, usually the center point of any workshop certainly is in this one. Table saws plonked in the middle, and everything else is arranged around the perimeter of your workshop, your benches, your bandsaws, your planers, and all that sort of stuff. Great for cutting sheet material. Although to handle full sheets like 8x4s, you need a fairly sizable machine, a panel saw more than a table saw, with a huge spread of tables to support the weight of a big panel. And even though with a big panel saw, it can still be a little bit tricky and a little bit difficult to cut. Hence the popularity of those handheld circular saws, those track saws these days. And even just a circular saw is good, just to take that big sheet down to manageable chunks. But anyway, we're going to look at the table saw, and we're going to look at setup, because we want our table saw to cut straight. We want our table saw to cut as square as we can get it, as clean as we can get it, and quite quick. Table saws do cut quite quickly. What we're trying to avoid, here we go, what we're trying to avoid is your circular saw blades end up looking like this. Now look at the black burning on the one side of that blade, and look at the hot spots. And what's a hot spot? Not for those of you that remember that TV show, I don't know. I'll leave a comment if you know what's caused this. I will go over it a bit later, but leave a comment if you know what's caused this blackening. Ben, if we can go over to camera 3 for us. Just look at that blade. It is ruined. Not only is the blade ruined, but there's a strong chance that the table saw could be ruined also. With all this blacking, it just overloads the machine so much. It's horrible. But like I said, if you know what's caused that, leave a comment below. Right. Oh, we got a question already. Fantastic. Yes, please.
So Frederick's asking, he says he's possibly wrong, but he thought dado saw stacks were illegal in the UK, or at least frowned upon.
Illegal, no. I mean, you're not going to get the sheriff knocking on the door. Illegal, most definitely not. They're deemed as frowned upon because many machines don't have good guarding, and to use dado saws, which is a stack of blades, a number of blades along a shaft where your normal one blade would fit, you got to take the guard off to use it. You got to take the riving knife off to use it. Well, when cutting a groove or a channel, you don't need a riving knife, because it's not a complete severance cut. And we'll look at the riving knife in detail. But the main thing is, Frederick, you've got to take the guard off, and it leaves loads of blades whizzing round and round, 4,000 RPM exposed, which is the concern. If you get any shards come off and blades come loose or whatever, not saw blades should come loose very often, but there's just no correct and adequate guarding. And those are HSE words. All right. So another question.
Well, Jim's come in with an answer to your quandary.
Yes, please, Jim.
He's saying the blackened blade is from the fence not being in line with the blade, causing binding.
Well, absolutely. What it is the blade's been put on the machine kind of as normal. You know, blade's all right. And it's a really good quality blade. It's one of our premium range blades. And a return from a customer. This blade isn't cutting very well. What have you sold me? And, you know, educational type conversations were had with that person, of course. But yeah, absolutely right. Ben, if we can go overhead, my friend. Look, I've isolated this machine so I can dive in close to the blades and have a good look. Here we go. You can see me swinging the plug around there. You know, it's nice and safe. But what we've got is there's your blade. All right. I've got a dead overview here now. So real bird's eye view. And what's happened to this blade? Let me wind that blade up to the maximum, this little blade. What's happened is with the fence has been what's called towing in. This fence needs to be perfectly in line with the blade. And I'm going to go through setup for you in a bit. But what's happened is this fence has been what's called towing in. So instead of being parallel through this area, it's been closer at the back than it is at the front. So when you're feeding your material through here, it's actually being pushed into the side of the blade, causing that horrible blacking. All right. Now, not only is it going to potentially cause kickback for you, because if you feed into the back of the blade, Ben, if we can get a camera too, sir, if you hit something on the back of the blade there, at the back of the blade, we've got upwards force. Front of the blade's more downwards force to the table. I'm hoping you can see that. Back of the blade's upward force. So if you're stoving something into the side of the blade, either side, you get upwards lift. So it becomes very unsafe. And if you're one of these individuals that thinks it's okay to take guards and riving knives off because they're a pain in the bum and they get in the way, you're going to end up in trouble. It's just as simple as that. I've seen some horrible graphic things in my 30-odd years of dealing with blades and tables or saws and stuff. I'm not going to put any pictures up. Don't worry. It's not a horror story, but it could be if you get it wrong, guys. I can't emphasize enough the importance of riving knives and guards and good alignment. It will make your machine perform better. We can come over to camera one. It will make your machine perform better. It will cut cleaner, cut straighter. And this thing that you've spent your hard-earned cash on will last longer. Simple as, because you're not overloading that motor. That is a machine killer. It's a machine killer. And an operator damager. You know, you could get hurt. You know, it's a horrible thing. And that blade's had it. To buy this blade new, like I say, it's an industrial premium grade blade. This one's about 70 quid. You know, in no time, if you've not got that machine aligned, you will ruin that blade, regardless of how much it costs and how tough and durable you think it is. You've got it wrong. I'm here today to help you get it right. Simple. Ben?
So Miriam Wales is saying, hi, Craig. She uses pretty much every type of saw except the table saw because they scare her. Could you give her, give her some calming wise words and maybe a table saw recommendation for a scared newbie?
Yeah, most definitely. Circular saws can be quite scary. They can be. They're very aggressive cutting tools. And if you get it wrong, just through alignment issues, or you're stood in the wrong place, or you're feeding through incorrectly, they really can be quite scary. You know, a health and safety stat. Circular saws are responsible for more digit removal than any other woodworking tool by 10. Now, there are a lot, that kind of stat is a little bit skewed because there are many different types of circular saws. There's table saws, circular saw blade, chop saws or miter saws, circular saw blades, handheld circular saws, still circular saws. So that is, you know, but there's no saw that's 100% safe if you've not got your setup right and you're not using it correctly. This I'm really come to. I've used a lot of table saws over the years. It got all shapes and sizes and qualities and new, old. You know, I used to refurbish secondhand machines, so I've had my hands on all sorts of stuff over the years. And what I'm going to show you now is kind of my method to get it true, get it straight, get it right. And they are a useful tool. They'll cut fast. They'll cut clean if you've got the right blades and setup. I've really come to like this Craft one. It's not massive, physically not big. It's a 216 millimeter blade, or 8.5 inches for those who want to talk imperial. Induction motor, smooth, quiet running. Doesn't roar, doesn't shout at you like a lot of table saws do. The cast iron table keeps the vibration very low, and adjustments and setups are sweet and nice and easy, which I'm going to go through, of course. I'll tell you some table saws that are lovely without breaking the bank. I like Bosch. Bosch do 2 table saws, the GTS 10 table saws. They've got a big one and a slightly smaller one. They are brush motors, but they're quite high quality brush motors, so noise is quite low. They've obviously got all the safety features, guards and riving knives and whatnot, but they're not massive, they're not big. So you can, one in particular, I think it's the GTS 10 SJ, something like that, is like a small kind of lift out the back of the van job with a little pull-out extension table. Lovely little thing. But if you're looking for a workshop kind of cabinet saw like this one, you can't go too far wrong here. I know I'm probably a little bit biased. I'm paid to be biased, maybe. I don't know. But an 8.5 inch version, this is going to give you, I think it's in and around a 60 millimeter depth of cut. That's a lot for a table saw of this size. But we do a 10-inch blade version as well, a 254 mil version with a bit more power, of course, which will cut 80 millimeters deep. And it will do it. I've done it, testing these things as I do. So stay tuned to this one, Maria, and we'll have a good go through it. I'm going to talk about alignment, setup, pitfalls, bits and I'm going to talk about a couple of safety bits as we go, you know, my preferred standing and hand positions and stuff, so we can look at that. And I'll do a couple of cuts as when we get through the kind of setup tips. Another question.
So we've got a statement here from Robin. He says this is good timing. He's just bought an AC254. It arrived 2 weeks ago and he's finally got it built.
Good.
And then Cliff's asking, will Craig be showing how to cut tracks or grooves using a table saw? And then a couple of comments down, he's asking about on the craft level table saw.
Can't do it on a craft level table saw because to do a groove, a channel, a rebate, you've got to remove the riving knife and guard. Table saws really are for through cuts and complete severance cuts, like chopping boards up, chopping bits up, and not necessarily for grooves and stuff. The one machine that we do isn't the craft range. It's a trade range, kind of professional style. Because we've got this large overhead guard, we're able to remove the riving knife, because you can see on the craft one, if we can go to camera 2, Ben, you can see the riving knife, the guard is mounted to the riving knife. Remove the riving knife and you've got no guard in place. This one, over to camera 1, thank you. Because we've got a completely independent guard and it's not mounted to the riving knife, we can remove the riving knife to do grooves and channels, but it's the removal of guard. So on the craft one, no.
And then Afzal Ali is asking, are we ever going to see saws like the Sawstop in the UK?
It's already in the UK. Festool have a machine very similar to that. Not a cabinet saw, it's more of an on-site type saw. I forget the number. It's something 80. But it's on our website. We are doing it. It's only come into the UK about 18 months ago. It is on our website. It's not called Sawstop, although it uses that very same kind of technology. It isn't the cheapest thing in the world. Festool and Sawstop got together. It's never going to be that cheap. But yeah, it's quite a nice way to work. Yeah. Okay. Right. Let's get stuck into this table saw and we'll look at my kind of step-by-step to get him running sweetly. As said, I've unplugged it so I can dive in and do whatever I want with this machine. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take this guard off. which also has a top extraction pipe, as you can see. Nice big pipe, 60 odd mil, good airflow. I think with some, if you reduce that pipe down to the Hoover pipe size on the top of a guard, you don't get a lot of airflow action in that area. So what we've done, we've tried to keep this as big as we can on top of the guard, just to remove as much dust as we can. So that's a nice thing. So there we go. There's your guard. I'm going to put that on the floor. Let me remove a couple of odds and sods that I've got on the top, and all stuff I'm going to show you how to use in relation to your table saw. Let's take the fence off. Right. And there we got it. We've got our table saw. I'm even going to wind that blade down a little bit. Smooth winding, just see the riving knife just sticking over the top. Now, what was the guy's name with who's just bought one? Justin? Was it? Anyway. Sorry.
Robin.
Sorry, Robin. Don't know why I called you Justin. I think the first thing we like to do, or I like to do, is make sure that your tables, your main table, and these extension tables, they're all kind of as level as you can get them. Nice and flat. And it's just as simple as putting a spirit level on there, you know? Let's try and make these as level as we can all round. So as we're feeding material through, we're not going to get stuck on a high bit of table, and our material isn't going to rock all over the place as it goes through the cut, because we've got complete support. So that would be my first tip, is get your tables level. There's usually leveling screws and stuff to get these things as near as you can. And a spirit level is good enough. You haven't got to get one of these really expensive straight edges on this machine, and the machines are this sort of size. This is straight enough. Or if you can guarantee a nice straight bit of wood, but you can't always guarantee that. Tell me, I know. So that will be my first tip. Get your tables level. Then what I'm looking to do, I'm looking to these two mitre fence slots. If you intend to use them, which they're quite a good feature, some people like to make their own cross-cut sleds out of wood these days. But if you're running a mitre fence, now let me get the mitre fence and drop it in. This is the UJK mitre fence, so quite a high level number. Beautiful. Look at, there's kind of no slop in that groove at all. It's because we got adjustment within this bar, so we can take up any slop. But wind that blade up. Now, all the checks I do to see whether my mitre fence slots are in line with my blade, I will do with the blade wound up to the maximum. Ben, if you can just come in a side view, look at that. All right, my blade's up to the maximum. And what that does there, it gives me a really wide point to check for alignment. If the blade was lower, I would only get, let me show you, I would only get maybe that amount just to check alignment. It's not a lot. The wider the blade, the easier it is to get precise. Now, the mitre fence slots, and we'll use the mitre fence in a minute or two, you just want that sliding through parallel to the blade. You don't want, similar to the conversation I had earlier about blacking on the blade, if these slots aren't parallel, there's a chance that when sliding through, you could stove something into the back of the blade. And then you wouldn't get the best to cut, it wouldn't be clean, it'd be a bit black and burny, and it may be not as safe. Now, I'm going to go through my setup tip for aligning your mitre fence slot. Some have two slots. Some have only got one slot. This is a beauty. It's got two. And I just simply use my good old trusty combination square. I use this a lot in the workshop for doing jobs like this, as an obvious square itself, as a depth gauge. Right, if I need to know the depth of that mitre fence slot, I know that's 10 mil. You know, they're just such a useful thing, and they come in a variety of different qualities, sizes. This is kind of Axminster one. It's kind of average quality and price, and they're great. So how will I use it to align these slots to my blade? It's a simple thing. This edge of my mitre fence slot is going to end up running on this edge of my combination square. I will go in like that. I'll slide this over. Now, I've got a little bit of rock and roll there. What I always do, so I can get some consistency, is make sure that is down on the table. I hope you can see that. And you can do it two ways. You can kiss this up against, making sure that this is pushed against the slot, tilted down. And you can just do that and kiss the end of the rule on your... Like that. I don't know if you'll pick this up on the microphone. All right. That tungsten tip is just touching the end of the rule on my combination square. Right at the front point of the blade there. Over top. Can we go camera 3, Ben? All right, so we can see I'm checking right at the front of the blade. Then, with that locked off, I'm going to slide to the back of the blade. I'm going to do just the same. Hopefully you can hear that. I'm working now on the tungsten tips. That tip is touching. That tip is touching. Now, that tells me that that is kind of running parallel through. You can work off the plate of the blade as well if you want. It's up to you. Doesn't much matter. So just slide through, lock off, and then you can just check in this area that everything's running straight. Now, what if it isn't? You know, these all come pretty good out the factory, but maybe they just need a tweak. This particular machine, the tweaking is as easy as I've ever seen on any table saw. You've got a series of bolts. I don't know where camera 2 might just... Oh, yeah, you can just see that there. There, and there's a couple the other side. It's the actual tabletop that moves subtly left and right. So undo those and just make very subtle side-to-side movements if you need to. This is one of the beauties of this particular style of table saw, and the other one that I've got in my workshop here, the trade one. The tabletop is independent to the actual guts, the trunnion, the running of the machine and the motor underneath, making adjustments so much more easy. If you've got a table saw that maybe doesn't have that, if we can go to camera 1, my friend, if you've got a table saw that maybe doesn't have independent movement, you will see there is always movement, adjustment. You will see some bolts in the top of the table. Now that is holding the trunnion, the guts, to the underside of the table. And what you need to do is just slacken off those bolts, and then you can move the trunnion, which in turn will move the blade ever so slightly. So what we have now is flat level tables, mitre fence slots that run in line with the blade. We've got a good start. This is starting to look like a table saw that I'd want in my workshop, because I don't want to be... And a well set up machine will save you time. It'll take you a bit of time to set this thing up, I know, but every cut subsequently will be straighter, cleaner, truer. And what does that mean? We all know what that means. Less planing, less sounding, less messing about when we're trying to put stuff together. If you can bring material off your table saw or bandsaw, cleaner, squarer, straighter, why not? Another question.
So we've got a question here from Chris. He says he's currently using a DeWalt DW745 with a Fruit 60 tooth blade.
Yep.
Looking to do a couple of cutting boards. Can you recommend a blade for cutting hardwoods, please?
That blade will cut hardwoods. Now let's talk about blades just for a moment before we get stuck into more of the setup. I like kind of 3 blades. I like a ripping blade, so something coarse for going down the grain. Something along these lines. Let me bring that one out as well. If we can go camera 3. So something like that. All right. This has 24 teeth on a 254 10-inch diameter. It's a fast-cutting, aggressive blade for ripping down the length. It's not going to cross-cut very well. Not only will it be extremely aggressive and shred or potentially shred some timbers, I have seen it with people feeding in fast. It can stall the machine because the big tooth and the gap in between these big tooth try and grab too many cross-cutting fibers at one go. and they just don't nibble their way through. If you've got a blade like this, the tendency is that, well, I can cross-cut, it'll cut anything. It cuts so fast and so aggressive. You've got to really take your time on cross-cutting. And really, it ain't the blade for, this is my deep ripping down the length blade. The blade that kind of is middle of the road, I'd say, is something like that. That's the blade that I've got on there. So it's about 40 teeth. So not too fine, not too coarse, will cross-cut reasonably well, leave a reasonable finish. And it'll rip reasonably well, albeit a little bit slower than that ripping blade I showed you. So it's a good all-rounder. And something you'll find on this craft machine is a premium combination blade. Bit of rip, bit of crosscut. And that's probably the blade that I'd recommend for you for your chopping boards. Certainly, I've done a fair few chopping boards myself, both cutting the strips on bandsaw and table saw. And if I'm doing a table saw, I want a combination blade. So about, if it's a 10-inch diameter, which I think your DeWalt is, I think we should look at about 40 teeth. I think 60, if ripping down the length in thicker stuff, just might be a bit slow and might just stall you a little bit. And then we've got the other end of the scale, which is a fine tooth blade. All right, quite a high tooth count. So this one's got 80 teeth, great for cutting sheet material, super durable tooth shape, and also very, the ultimate cross cutter. So a good clean finish off that. But your chopping board question, go with a 10-inch 254 40 tooth blade. And I've got, obviously, the best blade you can buy quality-wise is all important. I always, even if you've got the cheapest of cheap table saws, band saws, circular saws, whatever it is, let's spend some money on blades. That's where your machine comes into contact with the timber. It will turn your good saw into a great saw. It'll turn your bad saw into a good saw, or a better saw anyway. And that's the same on chop saws, band saws, router cutters, scroll saw blades. Dig a little bit deeper. It makes a hell of a difference. Another question. So I've been rabbiting about blades. I could talk blades for 2 weeks. Ben's going, enough with the blades.
So Maria in Wales is saying she noticed that it has a cast iron top. The Bosch looks like it's aluminium. Is cast iron better?
Yeah, cast iron's always better. More solid, more rigid. Will absorb vibration. However, if you need to move it around the workshop, in and out the back of the van and stuff, that's got to be one of your considerations. If it's a machine like this that's going to sit pretty much in the workshop, having said that, you can get wheels for these. We've got a lovely set of wheels on this particular machine. You just wheel it around the workshop. Cast iron's always better. Yes, Ben.
And then there's a couple of questions about whether you measure on the tooth or the blade body.
Yep.
But I think we answered that as we went along.
I think so. Yeah, it's either or. Just make sure it's tooth or blade body, or do both if you want. If you just want to double check things. But personally, I always work on the teeth, the tips, the cutting area, the bit that does the work. That's just me.
And then again, Bill's kind of echoing that. He's saying maybe mark the tooth at the front and the back so you can get it the same each time. And he's also asking, is there any plans for Axminster to produce flat teeth, to produce smooth slots when trenching?
No, there isn't. However, years ago when I was a boy, I used to, I was a saw doctor. I sharpened and repaired circular saw blades, router cutters, bandsaw blades, and stuff like that. And if somebody come to me and say, no, I'm looking to do that, I would grind the tops of the tips flat for them. And if you've got a local saw duct to buy you, take the blades from them. They'll happily put a flat top on it. Most circular saw blades, sorry, Ben's going, no more blades. Most circular saw blades have tungsten tips. Look at this. This is actually a giant tungsten tip that I made for staff training, actually, to show them the geometry of a tungsten tip. they've got this angle on the top here, and it's usually a 15-degree angle, and that makes this cutting point super sharp. You'd have every other tooth, one would be angled that way, next one angled that way, so you get that what's called an alternate top bevel, super sharp because you got these corners slicing through. However, if you're looking to do trenches and grooves, you end up with a little V going through. You check out next time you use a circular saw, which probably got this type of blade on, you'll see that little V as you're cutting. As said, a saw doctor will grind this section off and flatten it off here for you. So if you want to do grooving and trenching, of course, with the right guards in place, you can do this, yeah.
And Jim B's asked, he spotted the X-shaped blades on the pillar. He's asking what they're for.
Yeah, they're Dado blades. What I can do is, let me do a little bit more on the setup, and then I'll show you those blades. Like I said, I'm going to do a complete overview of the Dado, the saw it goes on, and the other bits and pieces that that particular machine does in October. So yeah, but I'll touch on it later. So where are we? We have level tables. We have mitre fence slots that are running beautifully straight and true with our table saw. What I like to do next is, if we go to camera 2, my friend, thank you, is this square here. All right. We need to check that. Generally, this machine, I found it to be super out of the box and certainly good enough for wood cutting. You got to think this is wood that we're cutting here, and some of the I got to kick myself sometimes because some of the levels of accuracy I'm trying to work to are engineering extremes. You know, a bit of wood, you cut it one day, you go back to it the next to joint it up and do what you want with it, and it's moved and twisted again. We've all had that, I'm sure. So I'm working to extremes here, but what I'm looking to do is get that square there. So again, I'm going to wind the blade up to the maximum to give me the biggest kind of datum that I can work to. And it can be just as simple as getting your square. Your combination square is square enough for me, and drop it there. All right. Now you notice that if we go over the top just a sec, Ben, this particular machine, this particular table saw, the blade is offset in the table insert. I check it on this side where it's got the most cast iron. I'm not going to check it on the table insert, although I'm doing my best to make sure that this table insert is level to my table all round. I want to work off the main table, so I'll check it that side where my square has more contact surface area with the table. And I'm looking just to put it against the plate. All right, easy as that. I'm trying to avoid the tungsten tips because the tips are slightly wider than the plate of the blade, and it could throw my square off a little bit. So I'll make sure that I've got it at the highest point of the blade. Square is flat, up against there, and I'll get down and give it a proper good look. That's beautiful. Now, your table saw will have this. There's another way to do it. This is a pretty cool little device that I tend to use a lot. If we can go to camera 2, my friend, there we go. The level box, the digital inclinometer. So turn it on. Hopefully you see a bit of a green screen there. I'm 0.1. I can zero that off. Hopefully that says 0. And my eyesight's getting bad, Ben. You'll have to point me, mate. And then what I can do is put it on the blade, avoiding the tips again, magnetic this is, and see where we go. I'm going to come round. Oh, look at that. I'm hoping you guys can see that. That's just hit at 90 degrees. Now, I've not set this with this inclinometer. I've gone off a square, and albeit a combination square, which maybe isn't the most precise square to use. My all-time favorite kind of squares to use, to be honest, is a good old trusty engineer square, 6-inch engineer square. I find them the most precise, but that's me being ultra fussy. Because what we want also is, if we're tilting our blade, now table saws are great because they cut straight, but they'll cut at angle as well. You know, we can tilt this blade over, then if we can go overhead as well, you can see that kicking over there. But when we want it to come back square, we want it to come back square without too much messing about. So again, what we can do is put that on there, avoiding the tips, and just wind that. Oops, I wind it down. That's silly boy. I want to do the tilt, not the up and down, the rise and fall. There we go. So that can just come round and round and round and round and round and round. And there's always a stop. This one's lovely. It's visible through this little quadrant gap here. And on the threaded bars that are inside, there's a little collar that surrounds that threaded bar with a grub screw in it. And you can adjust that left or right if you need to, of course. So it comes back to donk, a positive stop, and I've got 89.9. Damn it. No, that's close enough. That's incredible. All right. So that's a way of, so where are we? We're flat and level. We're parallel with our mitre fence slots. We're square. One thing really left. I'm going to talk riving knife and table insert in a minute or two. But what I'm going to do first, I think I'm going to answer this question. And then I'm going to align the rip fence to the blade. That's important. And we'll look at the way I do it. And hopefully you'll find it useful.
So a question from Bill here. He's asking about the clearance insert. He's saying, is that a zero clearance insert? It doesn't look like it will take the blade tilt to 45 degrees.
Yeah, it does. It does. It is what's kind of known as zero clearance or close clearance, this one. The regular table insert that comes with this is an optional extra. If you want the... in this machine, we've got quite a useful cabinet, actually, if you buy the cabinet stand. So you can store all your bits and bobs. That's a regular table insert, that one. You can see the gap that the blade runs through is wider than this gap here. There's a potential for little shards, if you're cutting little slithers off, for it to go down there and maybe get stuck against the blade. It's rare, and this is really common. It's been around for years, but we can improve that. What we've done at Axminster is ensure that we've got, if you want, a close clearance table insert. But the blades will tilt through to a full 45 because it's been engineered underneath, so that pivots in just the right place. And this cabinet is, I've got all sorts of bits and bobs under there. Got my sandwiches, bottle of Budweiser. No, I haven't. No alcohol in the workshop. Honest. So, your table insert is a very important part of your table saw. Same as your table insert on your bandsaws. Very important. It takes a lot of pressure, a lot of load. So, it's one thing I've got a real problem with when I see cheap table saws. First thing I do, and I know a lot of people, the first thing they do is kind of rattle the fence. Is that straight? Is that true? Is that rigid? I push the table insert with my finger because I've known table saws that have had the table insert collapse under load. So, if we go camera 2 again, my friend, that's the normal rotation of a circular saw blade. Downward pressure there. Yeah, see that? If this table insert is made of plasticine, which it seems to be on some of the cheapos, it's a real issue because they can collapse, explode inwards, and take your timber and maybe even your push jig and your bloody hand with it. I've got a problem with those. The rest of the table saw seems to be all right. So if you're going shopping, just check that. But if you've got a table saw that maybe that's a little bit dodgy, just make a new one. Just make one out of a bit of chunky solid plastic, a bit of nice ply. Don't make like MDF because that does flex and move after time. If you can, make them out of aluminium like this. This particular one on this machine's got lovely little leveling screws as well. If we go overhead, sir, these little, can you see? There we go. Either side of the mounting holes. All right. There, 2 little grub screws. Now that's for leveling, so we get as flat and as flush as we can. Because what you don't want is if you're putting a bit of wood through, You know, you come to this point, you're feeding on through against the fence, of course. Let me stand out of the way. You against the fence and you go donk, you get stuck against there. Or if it's too low, the table insert's too low, you're coming on through and you get stuck against the back. And what do you do if you get stuck? You'll push it harder. And then if you push it harder, you slip. It's fairly obvious what could happen. So, rip fence. A very important part of any table saw. Let me just clear my table off slightly. So the rip fence really just is a straight guide, same as on a bandsaw. All right, and it slides up close to the blade and gives you a guide, something to run your material against. Oh, where are we? Something to run your material against in use. Because, you know, although I do it on a bandsaw, cutting stuff freehand like that, if I was to draw a line down this bit of wood, let's just pretend. Here we go. Let's just do that. There's no way I'm going to be happy putting that through like that, even though I've got a riving knife and a guard on. I just don't want to do that. Because with the best will in the world, that's going to happen. And as soon as that happens, you pick up on the back of the blade and there's a potential for the material to be flicked back at you. So a rip fence, when cutting straight, is important. And same cross-cutting. If you're cross-cutting like that, cross that grain. Don't do it freehand. It's going to go wrong for you. Use either a wooden sled that you made yourself. Now, there's a million YouTube videos on making wooden sleds, I know. But use a guide, and that will slide through with control. Even if you want to cut at angle, of course. Well, let's pop that over. That's a 22.5. There we go. Sliding through gives you the control. So use these fences. So how do I align my fence to my blade? It's a really simple job. What I'll do, wind the blade up to the maximum, of course, and I'll just simply slide the rip fence over, and I'll bring my sub fence over, and I'll talk about the sub fence and its function in a minute or two. And all I'm doing is sliding it over. Is it the same front and back? You know, if a tungsten tip's touching at the front, is it touching at the back? In this area, is it the same? You can even get a feeler gauge in there if you really want to. Now, what about if it isn't? Now, if it isn't, it's a relatively easy thing to adjust. On most machines, it'll have this adjustment. All right? Now, if you look, yeah, you can just about see that. If we go above, yeah, that'll do. We've got 4 of these. You can only see 2 in this camera angle, but there's 4 of these little countersunk screws, which are easily undone. And then what that gives us is movement. Now, this is something you should do and check with all table saws. I don't know how old it is, but what we've got there now is that movement in this area. I'm going to undo those just a little bit more. I don't like to undo things too much. Just enough to get me wiggle. There we go. So when we're locked rigid in place here, you know, my fence block is locked to my fence rail. I'm locked off, and then I can bring it close and then wiggle it until I'm happy that that is kissing the blade equal amounts front and back. We have a question.
So Bill's asking about cross-cutting with the mitre fence.
Mm-hmm.
He's asking in combination with the
with the rip fence. Absolutely. But there's a big but, and I'll show you that big but in a minute or two when I do some cutting. Yeah, for sure. It's something that it's a really good feature of a table saw, but you've got to do it right. You've got to do it right, and I'll show you how to do it in a minute or two. Are we okay? So what we've got the wiggle. All right. So what we can do is literally offer it up just until the tip of the back, tip of the front are looking or touching or feeler gauge the same. And that looks really good to me. And then I'll lock that off. How easy is that? Now, you notice that I've got the sub fence down on the lower side, the blade wound up to the max. I feel it really just gives me a better viewpoint in there than having that high fence and maybe lower blade. I can just see things better. It works better for me and always has, actually. It's kind of the way that I've always done it and kind of always works. So there you go, that's your rip fence. Now you see, I mentioned a sub fence. Now this little slidey bit that most table saws and bandsaws have at the moment. I think it's more useful on a table saw, and it's certainly got a bit of a safety aspect to it as well. So if I'm cutting a piece of material, there we go, that's my fence now. Each and every time I bring that over, I know that's coming back where I want it, and it's solid and rigid. All right, terrific. How easy was that? In no time at all. You really got this machine. I know we've not cut yet and I've not proved it, but it's looking really good. Now the sub fence. This is this little slidey bit. All right, it has a low side and you can take it off and it's got a higher side. Thicker material, use the high side. Lower, thinner material up to about 30 mil, inch and a quarter. I use the lower side, and certainly when I'm cutting sheet material, I can get my push stick in there a bit better, and that slides on. So it's great for cutting skinny material, but I think more importantly, now if I was to get rid of that totally, and I'm sure there's a good few people that I know, there's a good few people that do this, I'll set my fence like this, right? Ignore these little bits, they would be off. What I've got is a safety issue now. As I'm feeding material through, and let me get that little bit of tulip that I had earlier. As I'm feeding this piece of tulip wood through here, say, there we go. All right, it's great. We're starting. We've got downward pressure at the front. Lovely. It's feeding on through. I'm feeding on through. It's cutting so well. And maybe my fence isn't quite as straight as it should be, or my driving the timber through isn't quite as good as it should be. There's a pinch point here. We've got an area at the back which is called a pinch point, and there's a potential for this material to be ejected up. Certainly if we're cutting small, lightweight pieces, is something you've got to be aware of. I like, and what kind of is deemed as the safer method, if you like, is the sub fence is kind of halfway through the travel on the blade. Camera 2 might show that as well. Yeah, so you've got this, and if we go above again, lovely, right? So halfway through the halfway through the saw blade. Now what we've got there now, let's lock that off. At the back of the blade, which is the kind of danger zone, if you like, is an open zone. So as my material's coming through, this is open. It's not putting any pressure against the back of the blade, which is the worrying area. This is all free and open. We've got the riving knife, which really helps us with that. And the riving knife, as said, is an important part of your table saw. It's got to be in line with the blade here. Your blade has got to match your riving knife width. So if you're going to buy another blade, just have a look at the writing on the side of the blade and get what comes, the curve, the cutting width that comes with it as standard. The riving knife has to follow the curvature of the blade here, but not be too far away. These riving knives are adjustable up and down and in and out. It's got to follow the curvature of the blade and really wants to be no more than kind of 8 millimeters away from the blade. Funnily, a standard pencil is 8 mil. All right, so if you can get a pencil through there, which I can't here, look. If you get a pencil through there, your riving knife's probably too far away. It's a safety thing, and the riving knife will stop the timber from pinching on the back of the blade. As you're feeding on through, there's natural spring in timber, so it could cross over if the riving knife wasn't there, pinch on the back of the blade and again be spat back at the operator. So what it does, it stops this pinch, and is a very important safety part of your table saw. There is adjustment to get, like I say, left and right. There's a couple of little grub screws underneath on most machines, and there's 2 or 1 big bolt underneath to take it out. But not often do you need to take it out, because of course if you take that out, you can't mount your guard. Your guard won't go on, will it? And we don't like using machines without guards, do we, Ben?
Nope.
Absolutely not. Okay, we got another question. Then we'll do some cutting then.
So that was great timing. Dances with Aardvarks was going to ask about tips on setting the riving knife, so that's brilliant.
Wow.
And then we've got where are we here? Sorry. Sorry. Malcolm's asking, are you going to touch on the sliding table?
I don't think I'm going to have time, my friend. Let me do a couple of quick cuts now, and we'll see how we get on. I will do my very best. Right, so let's do some cuts. We've got no more questions. So, quick recap. Tables are level. My defense slots, and of course you can use the my defense slots to align. If you know these slots are in line with your blade, you can in fact use the slots to align your rib fence as well, because you can just really run off the slot, can't you? Or you could align this edge with the slot, knowing that the slot is aligned. So there's a couple of ways of doing it. But let's do a cut. Let me close that door. All right. I'm going to get my safety specs on, of course. Now, quite often with table saws, I would use ear protection, but as I need to kind of communicate with yourselves and Ben, in this instance, I will not. What I'm going to be cutting, I'm going to be ripping down the length of this piece of rather pretty rainbow tulip. Look at that. Seems like a bit of a waste, really, doesn't it? But still, for you guys, there's no problem at all. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm not going to have the blade wound up to the max. If we can hit up camera 2, I'm not going to have the blade wound up to the max. All right? All of this blade exposed at the top here, I'm going to drop it down to, I don't know, about 3/4 of an inch, 20 mil above the workpiece, something like that. Drop the guard down a little bit so it doesn't get in the way, doesn't make contact, so it's just above. And I'll rip off, what do we say? Let's take off a 40 mil strip. All right. Remember, I've got my fence kind of midway past through the blade itself. Everything's locked off solidly. Everything's in line. Make sure my lock knobs are nice and square, nice and straight. I'm going to hook up my extraction. I've got my craft extractor at the back here. The kind of traditional style top bag extractor. But what I'm going to try and do is give you an idea of the noise level of this particular style of machine. It's going to be a bit tricky. Oops. I don't know whether you can actually hear that or not, which is a good thing. Really quiet. Induction motors, they are quiet. Bit of extraction. You can see my extractor come to life. Now, where am I going to stand? Where am I going to stand? All right. I'm not going to stand there because I don't want to get out the way. I'm not going to stand in line. Generally, I will stand to one side on the corner, generally here. I feel that it's a safer place to stand because if you have got something wrong and you get a bit of kickback, well, that's going to kick back straight towards the operator. And if I'm not stood in the firing line, all the better. But importantly as well, of course, I'll be using a push stick, absolutely always with the table saw. What it does is because I'm stood on this corner, my natural force pushing pressure is down towards this corner. And it's a real ease to slide that through. Really slow. Slow, steady feed through. My hand's out of the way now. I don't need my hand. I'm not going to go fishing for the piece of material. I mean, if we can get over to overhead. All right. Now, that has been just cut on a table saw that I wiggled around and set up for you. You can't see it, can you? There you go. How clean and straight that cut is. No burn marks. Honestly, the quality blade will give you almost like a plain finish. Very little shredding underneath. No back cutting. I know I'm not forcing my material into the back of the blade because you get like very obvious kind of black marks or saw marks coming up the back there. That is as sweet as you can make a cut on a table saw. And that's about a bit of 30mm rainbow poplar. So there's one cut. Nice and simple. So let's do a cut with using the mitre fence actually. Let's do that. And then we can use, we can show using the mitre fence and rip fence in combination with each other with the do's and the don'ts. So I'm going to move my rip fence completely out of the way just for a moment. I'm not using this at this point. And I'm going to drop in a mitre fence or a cross-cut fence. Yes, it cuts mitres. We can see how it all angles. All right. All right. Now, a mitre fence is exactly that. We want to try and get it so there's minimal wobble in there. And it will go, the material will come in like this. And then obviously we might have a mark on here that we're trying to follow. But I'll just do it random cut for now. Keeping your hands as far away from the cut as you can. You don't want to bring your hand over here. So I'm coming here, watching my pinky. And I can do some repeat cuts, but I've got no definitive repeat there, have I? All right. Well, let's just cut at an angle so you can see a little 45. And I'm going to leave those there. I'm not going to try and fish them out of the way. Here's my 45. All right. So let's just have a look at that 45 close in. Wait till it comes to a stop. There we go. I'd be happy with that. Ben's happy with that. He's nodding. He agrees. All right. Good telltale. If you can put it back together and barely see the line, you know you're going well. There you go. I've never cut that, but I have. Cutting well, cutting clean. But what about if I want regular sized stuff off my mitre fence? Let's get rid of those little bits of waste. You never go fishing for the waste when the machine's running. You leave it. So what about if I want just some blocks all the same size? Now I could, let's use my rip fence. I want some, what should we say? Some 50mm blocks. Some 50mm bits. Well, I can do this, can't I? I can do that, 50mm. Slide on through. But where's the issue? Where's the problem? What we've got is a little bit hanging around there. That piece that we want, that 50mm strip, is going to be lingering in there and potentially being, it's lightweight, it's sticking against the blade, rattling around, catching. So if you want to do that, yeah, by all means, set yourself 50mm, no problem. But retract your subfence all the way back there, leaving your cut zone completely clear and free. And what you've got then is stop, cut, stop, cut, stop, cut, and so on, giving you some sort of regularity without the risk of this being stuck in this area and getting pushed against the blade maybe. So that is where you can use your mitre fence and rip fence in conjunction with each other. Just draw back that sub fence. It's something that I do a lot. It's a great way of getting repeat cuts. Oh, we got another question. Let me turn that extractor off. Ooh. Hello.
So we've got a question from Chris here. He's asking if we've got a UK contact for UJK, but UJK is one of our...
Yeah, UJK is us. It's one of the Axminster developed brands. A lot of it's made in the UK, dovetail jig, path jig, other bits and pieces, something that personally I'm quite heavily involved with. I can be your contact if you've got any problems, questions, queries, ideas.
Well, he's looking for a miter fence for his DeWalt table saw.
Okay.
So we get in contact with Chris and
yeah, let me know. Yeah. Woodworking Wisdom and axminstertools.com. Sorry, mind blank there just for a second. But yeah, drop it and just measure that miter fence slot. Most are 3/4 of an inch. Some weird and wonderful ones might be different, kind of 1/2 inch, but let us know. We'll sort something. We'll always sort something in the scrap bin. Bit of a waste, really, isn't it? That was painful. So where are we? Yeah, I think we've got a table saw singing, not roaring, shouting, screaming at us, creating black blades, flicking bits of timber across the workshop. If you want to go hunting for those horror stories, they're there. But don't let it scare you from using the machines. Get in contact with us if you've got any safety concerns about, I'd love a table saw, but I'd love a bandsaw, but I'd love to start turning, but putting that chisel in there. But that's why we're here. We're happy to help with this. Another question, yeah.
So Bill's asking, does the cabinet come with the saw?
You get an option. You buy the saw as a kind of lump here. And then you can either have a splayed leg stand or the cabinet stand, or if you want to make your own kind of wooden frame stand to suit your thing, then you can do that. We sell it kind of modular. The one piece that is quite useful, like a giant miter fence, is the sliding carriage. Now, I'll answer Ben's question as I talk through this sliding carriage as well. So, Ben, we got another question?
So Frederick's asking about the yellow notice on the fence. It said that the sub-fence must be outside the markers.
Yeah.
So he's saying, I thought the yellow notice on the fence said that the sub-fence must be outside the markers.
Yeah, I don't know what this one means. This is a very unusual kind of indicator, but that's where it needs to be, Frederick. All right, midway through. We're mounting auxiliary fences to position them beyond the arrows. Yeah. No, I think that's not kind of correct information. The only time that I will have a full length fence if I'm cutting heavy, kind of longer sheet material. I feel like you need just a little bit of support behind, and I think that's what that's indicating to for cutting longer kind of sheet material, similar to really long lengths like this, or heavier full sheets. That's what that means. But for cutting natural timbers in kind of small to medium lengths, halfway through is always the way to go. Okay. Yes, Ben.
So CP is saying that he was taught when ripping that the path of the tooth through the timber should be as vertical as possible, i.e. that the blade should be as high as possible.
No, that's not the way I've been taught. No, I like, to get about 20 mil of that blade. So we don't, if you're cutting a piece of 1/2 inch stuff, say I'm cutting this piece of material here, and we're going to maybe if I'm cutting that piece of material, that's a wrong bloody handle. I'm cutting that piece of material, and I've got that all the way up there. There's an awful lot of exposed blade there that I don't need exposed. And what it's done, you've got one tooth in the cut at any one time there now. If I lower that down, unfortunately, you might not see this on camera. What I'm doing, as I lower it down to about around 20 mil above the workpiece, I'm introducing another tooth. So I've gone from 1 to nearly 3 teeth in the cut there by lowering that. That will improve the finish and improve the waste clearance. Right.
Okay. So we've got a few questions here. Why are the Dado blades not available in this country?
They are.
Or are they?
They are, yeah.
And then, could you repeat what causes the burns and the arc marks, please?
generally it's fence alignment. If we go over to overhead, my friend, it's with this fence being out of line with the blade. So the gap at the back is less than at the front. So it's kind of towing in. And when you're feeding it through, it's feeding the timber into the back of the blade, causing those horrible burn marks. If you're getting that, just double check your fence alignment.
And Maria's asking, does the mitre fence come with the saw?
No, it's an optional extra, the mitre fence. There's a variety of different, that was a kind of top level mitre fence. Relatively inexpensive mitre fences are 20 to 25 pounds, and they work okay. But I like the UJK one because it's got kind of adjustment to take up any slop, and I can get it super precise.
And Malcolm's saying he's just got the same saw a few weeks ago. The cabinet is a must in his opinion.
There we go. It gives it a little bit more rigidity as well, and great if you're wheeling it about the workshop. So we're just going to have a quick look at the sliding carriage. All right, now what that is a giant mitre fence. All right, and it will be great for cross-cutting larger pieces. And say, you wanted to cross-cut this larger piece of ply, for instance. All right. So let's just do a quick cut so you've got an idea. Yeah, material width. Oh, I unplugged it. See, too safe, Ben. Is there any such thing as too safe? Right, so I'm making sure my material is well clear. And it will just give me more control on bigger stuff. So it does the same thing as a mitre fence, only in a much bigger way. And yes, you can angle this fence as well. But it's important that, set up in squareness, of course, just like everything else. Right, machine stopped, I can fish that out of the way. And what I like to do for the sliding carriage, just to ensure that it's kind of square, blade up to the maximum again. This is going to be a little bit rushed, guys, so bear with me. I'm just going to get my larger square. Now, bigger square is the better on this. Now, I've got kind of this framing style square, which isn't my favorite style of square because they're reasonably precise. But what I'll look to do is avoid the tungsten tips, get the square sat on the plate, and then bring my fence to it. And I'm looking along this line. All right, so hopefully you can see that. All right, so that square there, it's against the blade, avoiding the tips. That comes in, checking that the fence is square to the blade. Now that's kind of step one. But what we need to do is ensure that this is running through the blade equally. So what we need to do is very similar to aligning the mitre fence slots. And this is just something that's kind of always worked for me. Might seem a bit crude, but I get a pen or a pencil. I get it gripped to my mitre fence, my fence here, pen and pencil, gripped there, and I will just tickle that tip at the front. I'll slide it through and just tickle that tip at the back. There we go, there and there. And yes, if you want to mark that tip and bring that very same tip round, not that that should make any difference if you've got the blade mounted correctly. There and there. And then, of course, just do a couple of through cuts, checking square and stuff. And you'll find that if you've got the sliding table towing in like a fence is towing in, you'll get a little bit of blacking on your material. Maybe you get a little bit of blacking on the back of the blade there. But yeah, so a really useful thing if you're cross-cutting larger stuff. Yes, Ben?
And Malcolm's asking, is the sliding carriage compatible with the left-hand extension table?
Can you go camera one? I'll turn the extractor off. Sorry, mate, could you repeat that?
I'm sorry. Malcolm's just asking, is the sliding carriage compatible with the left-hand extensions table?
It's not. No, it's either or. Often with a table saw, it's a right-hand extension, left-hand sliding carriage. It's kind of a standard that's always been. So if you've got an extension table that you've put on the left there, if you want sliding carriage, you've got to remove that and put that on. This is, for me, the best configuration. Right-hand extension, which comes with the Machina Standard. Rear takeoff table comes with the Machina Standard. And I love the sliding carriage because I've been able just quite simply to get that super precise, quite surprisingly precise on a machine that's craft, better than craft in my opinion. So if we've got no more questions, hopefully you've found that useful. As always, if you've got any questions that pop in your head as you're thinking about things over your pie and chips tonight, Woodworking Wisdom at axminstertools.com. We're always happy to help you guys with any questions. If you've liked this, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and share the channel as much as you can. Our subscribe numbers are growing quite nicely, but we're really looking to get to that 100,000. So please, let's have your help and let's do that. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. Have a good weekend. We'll catch you next week, where I think on Tuesday, Colin's messing around with resin or something like that. Thanks a lot. Bye now.